Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. Immediately after the tornado outbreak in Kentucky this weekend, Joe Biden started using it to push his global warming agenda. The Biden administration has been using this graph from NOAA, which appears to show an increase in the number of tornadoes since 1950. But NOAA has known for a long time that this graph is flawed. Tornado detection is much better now due to satellites and widespread use of Doppler radar. In the past, most tornadoes went unnoticed unless somebody happened to see them. So NOAA doesn't use the raw data, and instead they adjust for tornado inflation. After the adjustment is made, the apparent increase in the number of tornadoes becomes a flat line. There hasn't been any increase in the number of tornadoes since the 1950s. This graph, which the Biden administration is using, is flawed, and everybody in the scientific community who knows anything about tornadoes is aware of that. This NOAA page has a link to the explanation of why the raw data is flawed. The explanation has been deleted from the NOAA website, but it's still available on the Internet Archive. It details all types of gross errors with the raw data set. A more meaningful data set is this graph, which used to be on the NOAA website. It shows the number of strong to violent tornadoes, which peaked in 1974 and have been declining ever since. People were much less likely to not notice a strong to violent tornado than they were to notice a small one, which occurred out in the middle of a farm. The 1974 outbreak was the worst on record in the United States. There were 148 tornadoes in 24 hours, including 30 violent tornadoes. And 48 of the tornadoes, which occurred in just one day, killed people. The disappearance of this graph from the NOAA website is not surprising because it doesn't support the global warming agenda. In this chart, I overlaid the strong to violent tornadoes in blue on top of the graph of all tornadoes. You can see what the problem is. After the year 1990, the number of strong to violent tornadoes was going down, but the number of total tornadoes has been going up. This is once again due to better detection and different methods of counting. The Biden administration is fraudulently using the green graph, which is known in the scientific community to be flawed. 3 years ago was the first year on record in the United States with no violent tornadoes. And 5 years ago, the United States was experiencing an unprecedented lack of hurricanes, which terrified the Washington Post. It terrified them because it undermined their global warming agenda. This 1979 article from the New York Times provided a very good explanation of the thought process behind the current disinformation campaign. People always believe that the weather is getting more extreme and more variable, but it simply isn't true. What was actually increasing was the availability of information, which is being propagated over and over again by television. And that problem has gotten much worse since 1979 due to cable news repeating the same stories over and over again 24 hours a day. Dr. B. John Mason, director of the British Weather Services, told a news conference that despite a lot of loose statements, he knew of no evidence that the current extremes were any greater or any more frequent than those in earlier decades. People become vividly aware of current hardships and forget those of the past, Dr. Mason and others said. But the Biden administration is taking advantage of this situation to spread misinformation and scare people about the climate. Biden is very happy to use known flawed tornado graphs. Let's compare that to how the Biden administration handles fire data. It's well known that burn acreage was much higher in the United States prior to the year 1960. This correlated with the terrible heat waves and droughts of the 1930s and the 1950s. As of the end of January this year, this is what the National Interagency Fire Center website looked like. It showed burn acreage all the way back to the year 1926. But sometime after January 29th, the Biden administration deleted all the data prior to 1983. The website now says, prior to 1983, the federal wildland fire agencies did not track official wildfire data using current reporting processes. As a result, there's no official data prior to 1983 posted on this site. So what they did was they removed all of the data prior to the lowest year on record. By hiding all of the inconvenient data, they were able to make it look like there's an increasing trend. But there was nothing wrong with the earlier data. This 1938 article from the New York Times detailed the burn acreage very thoroughly. The New York Times article said there was almost 22 million acres burned in 1938. And we can see it in the Forest Service graph, 22 million acres in 1938. The reason that this data was deleted is because it doesn't suit the Biden administration agenda. And here's another document which the Biden administration has destroyed. 20 years ago, all of the relevant agencies in the government reported in the conterminous United States during the pre-industrial period from 1500 to 1800, an average of 145 million acres burned annually. Today, only 14 million acres are burned each year. Burn acreage in the United States is down 90% since carbon dioxide was at pre-industrial levels. This destroyed the Biden administration's agenda, so they deleted the document. And they replaced it with this message. The National Interagency Fire Center is committed to making its information and communication technologies accessible to individuals with disabilities. They removed critical information for everybody and replaced it with a cynical, woke statement. It's difficult for most honest people to understand how anybody could behave that unethically. The Biden administration intentionally uses flawed data while deleting the important good data. What the Biden administration is doing is not about science, and it's not about protecting the public. They are defrauding the public in order to push an agenda. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this fraud for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, and Caesar on the web at realclimatescience.com.